At last, the mystery surrounding Marilyn Monroe is resolved. It isn't attractive at all. Marilyn Norma Jean Mortensen was Monroe's birth mother. Los Angeles, June 1, 1926, California. Growing up in a succession of foster orphanages and homes, Norma Jean's early life was unstable. The need for safety and affection. Her Gladys Pearl Baker's mother endured from a serious mental disorder and was sent in an institution when Norma was really young, leaving her to raise her daughter by unidentified individuals and temporary guardians. These early years were characterized by trauma, ambiguity, and a persistent feeling of desertion, shadows that would haunt her as an adult. However, in spite of Normine had the odds against her, had a spark and a desire to ascend beyond her situation and a desire that she might become famous one day. Her debut in the modeling industry and the movie started out small. In the world during World War II, while employed in armaments factory, a worker found her and started posing for pin-up photos. Images. Her captivating appearance and camera-ready charm resulted in a prosperous modeling profession, ultimately obtaining the 20th Century Fox's attention, where she signed her first movie deal. This was the period when she adopted Marilyn Monroe's stage name, a name that would eventually be used interchangeably with Hollywood glitz. As a performer, Marilyn became well known in the 1950s, enthralling viewers with her dynamic and sensual screen presence charm. She starred in a number of box office hits in The Office, such as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Get Married in 1953, 1953's Millionaire, and 1955's The 7-Year Itch, demonstrating her humorous timing and unstoppable charm. Her rendition of A Girl's Best Friend turned out to be Diamonds, a landmark in culture, solidifying her reputation as the best Hollywood sex emblem. Monroe, however, was much more than an attractive appearance. She was a gifted performer who wants to get taken. Really? Desiring to be acknowledged for her dramatic skills and get away from the restricting Hollywood's typical casting, Marilyn was a method acting student at the Lee Strasberg's Actor Studio, where she put in endless effort to polish her art. This was a pivotal moment in her life when she struggled with how the industry views her. Movies such as 1956's Bus Stop, The Prince, and 1957's The Showgirl demonstrated her increasing maturity as an actress's commitment to the craft of performance. Her performance in 1959's Some Like It Hot would eventually earn her the Golden Globe for the comedy's top actress, also demonstrating her extraordinary breadth and talent. Following the spectacular success of Some 1959's Like It Hot, considered by many to be among the best comedy in movie history and a significant box office, Marilyn Monroe office hit once more withdrew from Hollywood. This pause, indicative of the bodily and emotional fatigue that frequently afflicted her, lasted for a few months. When she eventually came back on the screen towards the end of 1959, it was for Let's Make, a musical comedy. She accepted the project, Love, not because zeal or passion for the arts, although because she was bound by a contract to finish additional 20th Century Flicks Fox. During that period, Monroe was extremely conscious of the degree of control. The studio continued to work on her career, and the post was reluctantly accepted. Choice based on professional need as opposed to preference. She used her influence as best she could, but by selecting a well-known director, George Cukor will direct the movie. Cukor, renowned for his work with powerful women leaders such as Judy and Katharine Hepburn Garland, was said to be able to aid in building the movie around Monroe's multifaceted abilities. Then she's spouse, the renowned playwright Arthur Miller, tried to fortify the unstable basis of the movie by rewriting excerpts from the script that Monroe had harshly criticized for being slender and lacking inspiration. Even though they worked together, though the project was problematic from the beginning, the increasingly unpredictable actions of Monroe caused a lot of delays on set. Her regular absences and persistent tardiness caused conflict between the cast and crew. These absences were frequently connected to her increasing reliance on prescription medications that were intended to address her sleeplessness, worry, and physical conditions, but instead frequently left her unconscious and out of reach. This interference not only caused the filming procedure, but additionally helped a stressful and annoying environment on set, increasing the show for the public. Monroe was a part of a widely well-known liaison with her co-star. Yves Montand is an actress and singer from France. They splattered their romance across gossip columns and tabloids throughout the world, particularly given that both were married at the time. From Monroe to Miller and Montand to Simone, a French actress senior, the studio made use of the media craze, taking into account the buzz in the movie's marketing campaign in an effort to increase viewer interest. Let's Make Love in Spite of These Attempts received a lackluster critical response and disappointing box office results when September 1960 saw its release. Many people thought the movie was a miss, chance, hindered by a poor script as well as Monroe's preoccupied performance. The final movie Monroe would ever finish was 1961's Ease the Misfits, a stark poetic drama under John's direction, Houston, and composed just for her by Arthur Miller. Intended to provide Monroe's multi-layered, serious role yearned for, the movie adhered to the Rosalind's character, a recently divorced Reno, Nevada, lady who creates an intricate emotional bond between three Hollywood's portrayal of elderly cowboys. Luminaries Eli Wallach, Clark Gable, and Montgomery Clift. The position was intended to highlight Monroe's frailty and emotional richness, attributes that frequently overpowered by her stunning appearance. Nevertheless, the Misfits production was a challenging task. Shot in July in the scorching Nevada desert till November 1960, the filming was exhausting and intensely felt. Monroe's personal life was falling apart. Her Miller's marriage was failing under the stress of emotional detachment and opposing worldviews. While Miller started filming a romantic connection to Ing, the beginning photographer Monroe felt betrayed by Moritz profoundly, particularly as she had suspected Miller poured parts of herself, disturbed persona into the persona of Rosalind. Monroe was angry at Rosalind seems to have been built to accommodate the growth of the male characters instead of being a self-sufficient individual in her own right. She felt the role to be more and more agonizing because of its emotional impact and because of what she thought Miller's lack of empathy. To exacerbate the situation, late at night, Miller would often rewrite scenes. Night, occasionally just a few hours before the shooting was set to start. These alterations at the last minute, not just Monroe unanticipated but also helped her sentiments of inadequacy and insecurity, emotions she struggled with throughout life profession. Her physical condition was deteriorating as well. She experienced gallstones that frequently caused ache in the abdomen. Her reliance on various sedatives, including barbiturates, had intensified to the extent that she was frequently just partially conscious when she reached the set. Cosmetic artists would occasionally start putting on her makeup as she continued to slumber, drowsy, and hardly working. In August of 1960, Monroe's health deteriorated to the point that manufacturing had to stop, so she might be brought to the hospital for cleansing. She was in the hospital for a week to stabilize her health, even though the respite was a transient condition. In spite of her evident pain, Monroe was able to give a moving, complex performance, one that would eventually be featured in the Misfits, praised for being among her most responsible and fascinating parts. Unfortunately, both Clark Gable and Monroe would not survive to view the critical reappraisal over the long term. The movie would finally get. Gable died a few days later after a heart attack. After filming was finished, Monroe would pass on in less than 2 years, her existence still a turbulent mix of public admiration and personal anguish. Despite her hardships, Monroe remained for many people's empowerment. In a time when women's voices were frequently muted or rejected, she dared to ask for deference, confront studio bosses, and create Marilyn's own production company in 1955, Monroe Productions, a daring action that demonstrated her desire for individual creativity and professional command. This action was groundbreaking for a female in Hollywood during that period, and displayed her intense resolve to be regarded with respect. Born as Norma Jean, Marilyn Monroe Mortensen went through a turbulent 3 marriages throughout one's own life, which all resulted in divorce, demonstrating the emotional brittleness and the pursuit of stability and affection that defined a large portion of her personal life. She got married for the first time at a very early years and was more influenced by more necessity and situation than romanticism. She married James when she was only 16. In June, a neighbor named Dougherty, age 21, 1942. This union was primarily set up by Monroe's foster home to stop her from avoiding going back to the system of orphanages before her guardians moved. Despite Dougherty's generosity and encouragement, there was no passion or genuine love in the marriage. Emotional bond. As he sought employment in the Merchant Marine during Norma Jean started working during World War II, where she worked in a munitions factory found by a photographer. the scene putting her on a modeling career path and finally taking action. Her change wedged into Marilyn Monroe. In between them, according to reports, James disapproved of her professional goals, particularly her increasing self-reliance and modeling. They got divorced in 1946 as Marilyn had changed from being the peaceful housewife. He had a wife. Now she was pursuing a dream that was much bigger than both of them had imagined. Her second union was much more emotionally intense and widely known, featuring one of the most renowned sportsmen. January 14, 1954, Marilyn married Joe DiAgeo, a baseball legend, in a well-publicized ceremony that national focus. DiAgeo, the senior citizen, the slugger for the New York Yankees, was instantly captivated by Marilyn's vulnerability and beauty, and he yearned to shield her from the severity of the spotlight of Hollywood. However, in spite of his intentions, their partnership was tense with disagreement. DiAgeo, a cautious and reclusive man, he struggled using Monroe's picture as a sexual emblem and her parts in films that provoke thought. Tensions burst as the movie was being filmed. For 7 years, when Marilyn's famous The Great Scene from Subway was filmed in front of a sizable gathering, DiAgeo was reportedly enraged and degraded by the scene. They had different personalities. Monroe yearned for artistic independence and professional freedom. DiAgeo wanted a facial expression, but disliked her as a typical wife. Increasing notoriety. The psychological stress resulted in a severe and well-known divorce only 9 October 1954, few months later. Although they are no longer together, DiAgeo stayed loyal to her for the remainder of her life, renowned for sending her roses to many times every week for more than 20 years following her passing. Marilyn's third and the last marriage was to prestigious Arthur Miller's play, and it symbolized her most sincere attempt to discovering both intellectual and emotional satisfaction. The two started a secret mid-1950s courtship and got married on June 29, 1956, in a low-key civil ceremony, then a Jewish ritual 2 days later. This relationship represented Monroe's intention to be perceived as more than just a blonde shocking, but as a serious performer and thinker. She yearned for approval, and she thought that Miller, a well-known for his genius in literature and political wisdom, may offer that confirmation. They briefly shared a strong emotional connection, with Marilyn even embraced Judaism out of reverence for his belief. But their union was afflicted by Monroe's continuous difficulties with mental health, prescription medication dependence, as well as inferiority complexes. The close examination by the media, Miller's unease with her notoriety, and his personal disappointment, according to as evidenced by his own works, contributed to their disintegration. Connection. By 1961, 5 years following their nuptials, they separated. When this marriage ended, Monroe was left saddened and more alone than before, while she persisted in struggling with the inconsistencies between her public persona and her inner anguish. For many years, the unfortunate and premature Marilyn Monroe's passing has persisted in the public's perception, encircled by rumors of a plot, political cover-ups in Hollywood, and intrigue. The official explanation was determined to be likely suicide due to an overdose of barbiturate on the events on August 5, 1962, never entirely pleased a public that is doubtful. With time, innumerable theories surfaced, varying from unintentional overdose to intentional silence by influential people. Currently, with the introduction of recently declassified documentation, lengthy eyewitness accounts repressed, and forensic reassessments of the crime scene, the truth seems to is at last coming to light. Additionally, it is far more unsettling than many were willing to accept. At the center of this heightened examination is the unsettling potential that Monroe was more than just a troubled actress who sadly passed away from mental illness and drug misuse, but instead a weak woman is caught in a web of coldness, deceit, and manipulation, political scheming. New evidence indicates that Marilyn is closely observed by governmental organizations, namely the CIA and FBI, due of her love interest relationships with President John F. Kennedy and his sibling, Lawyer Kennedy, General Robert F. These relationships, that were formerly written off as rumors, are currently backed up by transcripts and surveillance records indicating that she might possess knowledge of categorized talks that became her a liability from a national security perspective. Including to the revelation's seriousness are recently discovered images and evidence that points to Marilyn's house was altered during the hours before and after she passed away. A few former law enforcement officers have confessed while being protected by anonymity under which pressure was applied them from the highest governmental levels to clean up the area. The phone logs were changed, journals were seized, and never came back. Significant discrepancies in the dying time was purposefully left not looked into. These actions weren't only mistakes. They participated in a methodical attempt to guarantee that the entire tale would never be recognized. The most disturbing feature of the discoveries, though, are not limited to who might have planned to silence her, but why. Marilyn, when she was most famous, was quite lonely as well, looking for affection and a purpose. According to reports, she had declared that a news conference would be held to reveal information she had discovered while talking on the pillow with the most influential men in the United States. Was it nuclear, tactical approach, mafia TIs, or the names of the unseen power brokers? It is said that Marilyn kept a red diary in which she recorded in detail remarks that some people think served as the catalyst for her killing. Days before she passed away, she was reported to be becoming more unpredictable, emotionally vulnerable, and paranoid. However, was it a true mental illness, or was she being duped and gaslighted into coming out as unstable so her prospective disclosures could be made more readily discredited? This eerie conclusion to her tale portrays Marilyn Monroe as not she was frequently a helpless blonde bombshell, depicted as a woman who was aware of excessively put your trust in the wrong people and died as a result of her life being too harmful to the powerful. What was formerly regarded as the most tragic in Hollywood overdose is now recognized as a frigid, strategic silence. Additionally, if this is accurate, and it's not simply tragic, it's chilly. Marilyn Monroe might have passed away by herself in her bedroom. Nonetheless, the causes of her death reverberates well beyond her boundaries. House. They address the merciless relationship between politics, celebrities, and power, and they serve to remind us that occasionally the reality is far too grim for the spotlight.